Good morning, everyone. I came out hoping to go for a long walk, and the forecast did say showers. But this isn't a shower, this is an absolute downpour. And I'm standing here soaked like somebody turned a fire hose on me. So I don't know, I'm just going to stand under this tree at the edge of this field and decide what I'm going to do. Well, that kind of screwed up my plans somewhat. I was hoping to walk to Teddington, but I'm now standing here, even though the rain has passed, absolutely soaked. I mean, properly soaked, like I fell in a swimming pool. Well, that's all right, we'll make a different plan. Because I keep walking through this wheat field and now I've had to stop and shelter under a tree. I'm actually quite interested to explore. Don't know if you can hear it, but the rain is dripping from the leaves every time a breeze shakes the trees. And what I'm inclined to do is actually just skirt the edge of this wheat field. Instead of going long, we'll go deep, if you see what I mean. I've walked through this field a bunch of times, I just never really skirted the edge and properly explored. And it is one of the pleasures of these walks, is when you drive through the countryside, you just see some fields and hills glancingly. But once you actually get out into it and get into the deep texture and smells and sights and colours of it, it's actually a much richer experience. And next time you see the countryside from your car window, you have a much richer sort of experience to draw upon. This is the back of a posh house just here. This is their wall, made of Cotswold stone. I was thinking about Cotswold stone last week. I went for a walk up the hill, Nottingham Hill. It's that one over there. And if you walk up those hills, there are these sort of scooped out sections that are actually old quarries. And that's where they've mined Cotswold stone, which is what this stuff here is. It's Jurassic limestone. It's sediment and seashells, particulates of seashell, sort of mollusk shell. Because apparently this landscape we're walking through was the bed of a tropical ocean millions of years ago. And that's generally what causes the formation of sedimentary stone like limestone. But in this particular region, there is a lot of ferrous oxide, or there was, in the ground as well, which gives it a very unique, slightly brown, reddish texture, which is much prized as a building material because it looks kind of warm and toasty. It's very pleasing to look at. And a lot of the buildings around here, the older ones, have that kind of very pleasing character, particularly Gloucester Cathedral, if you ever go and see it. It's unsurprisingly the cathedral in the centre of Gloucester. And it has a very pale stone. It's a beautifully proportioned building. It has a very light colour as well, which makes it very, just really pleasing to look at. So yeah, I was thinking about limestone. And the reason it gets used as a building material around here is partly because it looks nice, but also partly because it's easy to shape. Sedimentary stone is comparatively crumbly. It's a slightly sort of chalky quality. And if you tap away at it with a chisel, then it's pretty easy to shape, which is good and bad, because it means it's comparatively easy to use compared to, say, granite. But it also means it weathers quicker than other types of stone. And if you go to Gloucester Cathedral, there's actually a full-time stonemason's yard in Pitt Street nearby. where they spend the whole day just chiseling replacement stone for the exterior of the building. All these weathered sort of bits of filigree and apostles on the spire, around the edge of the roof. They're all looking a bit worn, and so they replace them and get up there with scaffolding and lift platforms and replace them. In fact, you can even book a stonemason's experience, and you can go and chisel your own block of stone, which I would very much like to do. In fact, I'm mentioning it now so I remember to Google it when I get home. But the thing that got me wondering is you get these guides going around the cathedral and they point at the spire and say this thing was erected in the 15th century. Cathedral's way older, but this spire was the last addition. And that's great. But if they're pointing to a bunch of fresh stone that was obviously put up there last Thursday, to what extent is it true? And it's kind of like that throughout these kind of buildings. If you go to the chapter house, which is one of the sort of side rooms of the cathedral, again, some very, very old stone has been chiseled out in the walls, and a lot of fresh, beautiful looking stone put in its place. But does that mean it's not the original building anymore? And apparently that is known as the Theseus's ship paradox. If you remember the sort of basic Greek myth of Theseus, he's the dude who went to the labyrinth and slayed the Minotaur and managed to find his way out because he laid a thread that helped him get out, retrace his route. And apparently the deal was that King Minos of Crete was a tyrannical leader and was tyrannizing the people of Athens and making them send young men as kind of a tribute every couple of years. And he was throwing the young men into his labyrinth as food for his bull creature, the Minotaur, King Minos's taur, bull. But Theseus went along, sort of young adventurer, killed the bull, found his way out of the labyrinth. And there's a brief sidebar. Apparently it wasn't actually a labyrinth. I didn't know this, but I sort of stumbled upon this piece of trivia a few weeks back. A maze on the labyrinth of different things. A labyrinth has a single route, and you find them sometimes in the back of the nave of cathedrals. There's a couple in France. They're like sort of mini pilgrimages. They're circular with a sort of winding path that leads to the centre. And it's, in medieval times, it's sort of represented the journey of life. Whereas a maze is the type of puzzle that has lots of dead ends and stuff and is meant to confuse you. Two different things. Labyrinth has a single route. And if Theseus could get lost in the Minotaur's sort of subterranean dungeon, it was a maze and not a labyrinth. But anyhow, Theseus defeated the Minotaur. And the people of Athens celebrated that long after his death by sailing his ship as his kind of, I don't know, celebratory voyage in honor of the god Apollo. Does make you wonder why they're doing it in honor of the god Apollo. I mean, they really ought to be doing it in honor of Theseus. He's the guy who actually saved them. But that's gods for you. Who's taking the credit? And the records, Plutarch at any rate, says that tradition went on for centuries, to the extent that they replaced lots of the planks in the ship and basically kept it going. They replaced sails, they replaced nails. And some Greek philosophers did wonder, to what extent can you keep replacing components of Theseus's ship and still claim it's Theseus's ship? And there's been a bunch of different variants of that paradox over the years. There's a famous one in the continent, on the continent of Europe. Hungary, Spain, and France have a variation called Gino's knife. An apocryphal dude has a knife and he replaces the blade, and later on he replaces the handle. And same deal, to what extent is it still Gino's knife? And if you live in the UK, you'll be familiar with Trigger's broom. There's an old sitcom called Only Fools and Horses, and one of the side characters was a rather dim-witted road sweeper called Trigger. And there was a famous scene where he's sitting in a bar getting sentimental over his broom that he uses to sweep the streets. And he says, "This thing stood by me through thick and thin. I replaced the head twice and the handle 3 times. But it's still going strong." The gag being, of course, that it's no longer the original object. I was thinking along similar lines when I was on holiday recently. I went to the Science Museum, and in the aeronautics section they have a couple of Spitfires and Hurricanes and Messerschmitts hanging from the ceiling. And the plaques nearby said they were real, you know, legit World War II aircraft. But they looked a bit plasticky to me. You were able to get fairly close, couldn't touch them. But they looked kind of fiberglass. So I did find myself sort of wondering, to what extent can you restore an aeroplane? Because you see these pictures of World War II aircraft dug out of fields. They obviously crashed during a dogfight. Decades later they get excavated. And you see them as part of a news report about a restoration. And they'll cut to the plane, brand spanking new, flying through the air. And you can't help but think, well, that's not really a restoration, is it? It's a replica, with maybe a couple of token bits of metal from the original included. And I did Google if there were rules for this kind of thing in the sort of vintage airplane community. Do they actually have rules for what constitutes a restoration as opposed to a replica? And apparently there aren't. There's no hard and fast percentage of a plane, but just an expectation that it does have to be substantially the original structure. You can't just stick the odd sort of bit of cockpit trimming in and claim it fought in World War II. Don't know if you can see whilst I'm panning around, but there are these swifts swooping over the top of the wheat. There's one over there. Camera's probably not going to show it up, it's too far away. But there is a lot of bird activity in this field. No sign of that red kite though. Oh, there we go. See that one? No point craning around trying to get them. Oh, they're all over the place. Yeah, maybe they'll be obliging and show themselves again. Yeah, but apparently a lot of aircraft restorers have started simply sidestepping the whole question of originality and describing their airplanes as not as replicas of restorations, but as continuations of an original plane. They simply shrug and fudge the whole thing, which is probably, you know, the wisest course of action. So I guess you could say that about Gloucester Cathedral. It's a continuation of a 15th century structure. And it does sort of raise the question of human selfhood. Because one of the bits of trivia I used to hear a lot when I was a kid is that the atomic sort of substance of the human body replaces itself every 2 years. The skin apparently the largest organ in the human body, um, sort of abrades away every couple of weeks, shedding skin cells, and stuff from deeper works its way out. Consequently, every 2 years there's a complete exchange of stuff. And I've heard that qualified recently. Apparently it's closer to 20 years. Skin cells and stuff does work its way out pretty quick, but the various metals and calcium and so forth in your bones takes lots longer to work its way out. Some of it's there for a whole lifetime. Some of it changes every 20 or 30 years. But it does kind of raise the question, though. If you're not your stuff, if you're not actually the substance of your arms and legs, where does selfhood lie? What actually are you? Are you the blueprint? Not so much a thing as a process. And it's an interesting thing to speculate on, and it is virtually impossible to start going down that route without getting seriously Buddhistic. But I find myself stopping there, because that's the thing. A lot of the great philosophical questions, the questions are universal, and we all face them. But the answers we come up with are particular to ourselves. Everyone has their own different cosmology, their own way of making sense of stuff. So it is interesting to sort of follow the path of limestone and the historic authenticity of Gloucester Cathedral and wonder what it all means. But once we've reached that threshold, it's kind of up to you. What are you? One day there may be definitive answers, of course. Scientists will know, maybe, why there is a universe, what it is actually composed of, what is the underlying sort of foundational substance of it, and maybe figure out human consciousness, how that, the fact that I'm standing in a wheat field, knowing that I'm standing in a wheat field, how does that happen? How does the brain generate that sensation, that phenomenon? But the one thing I'm fairly certain of is that those answers will not be provided in my lifetime. So I, like you, are going to go through life wondering. And that's all we can do, really. Look out on the world and contemplate the mystery of things. Well, the sky's cleared, so I'm going to go home and dry off. Hope you didn't mind my philosophical rambling too much. And a cloud goes over the sun. Well, let's head this way before we get wet again. Thanks for tagging along. I'll see you again soon.